First of all, I want to thank you, everybody, for being here, and I hope to add value to your knowledge or to your life in a way. And I want to say that being here is a real honor because I've been an academic and I'm a linguist, and I know that most professors write theories about learning languages, but they're not living the dream. And we're here among people who are actually living what they preach, and that's really an honor. Another thing is that I came here with the help of many people, and they're anonymous, but I want to thank them. So the title of this workshop is Find Out Who You Are and Then Do It on Purpose. So let's start with something very important. Who or what are we? That's a valid question, isn't it? What goes through your mind? Many things? Nothing? Well, I thought of some options. Of course, nothing is defined. A soul in search for experiences within a physical body, that would be a kind of a spiritual definition. Maybe just a brain with different systems that enable us to connect with the outer world. Human beings, that was said. All of the above, or no idea, a very valid answer. So here is like all the possibilities that we had. Of course, this is a very personal question, so it just stays with us. Another very valid question is, how do we perceive the world? What do you say? One possibility would be through our senses. Don't you think? That's a possibility. I'm not saying these are answers. So, what role does learning have in who we are? Okay, it shapes our identity. What do you think? So it gives us opportunities. That's an interesting answer. So definitely we would say no significant role is wrong. A key role, it shapes our existence. Maybe someone thinks, no idea. So we do believe learning is kind of important, right? The other valid question is, how do we learn? Yes? Through experience? Books? Huh? Intuition? Repetition? Sorry? Top-down learning. Good. Communicating. So I think you're all thinking about languages too, right? But we learn, there are so many different things we can learn other than languages. So some people would also say with different materials, using our brain and the right methods. Maybe that's, some people mentioned a few methods. Using our intelligence. All of the above, all of that, as I said, is also valid. As I said, there is no definite answer to this, but they are very valid and important questions to be asked to ourselves. We know the answer, that the valid answer for ourselves. So now I'm going to start. I mentioned here the word intelligence that is related to the learning process. And I'm going to cut the music now. So intelligence does have to do with learning, because it's somehow the ability that shows us what we have learned, or maybe the talent that shows how or what we learn. There are some criteria for the identification of intelligence. According to Dr. Howard Gardner, there are 8 criteria for identifying intelligence. One is high or low levels of a particular capacity in contrast to other capacities. This is seen, for example, in cases of autistic people or people that have special talents, the famous geniuses. Well, can you think of someone? Mr. Hawkins, right? Good. So another criteria is a distinct neural representation that is seen through brain scanning. So there are different paths in our brain that show us intelligence as well. Another aspect is a distinct developmental trajectory. So we are talking, of course, about different kinds of intelligence. We are going to get very deep into that soon. That is, different intelligences should develop at different rates. So everyone is multi-intelligent, and that is noticeable and acknowledged in these criteria by Dr. Gardner. Another thing, and this, sorry about the fancy words, I just wanted to quote, a previous instantiation in primate or other species and putative survival value means embodiment or real manifestation in primate. So this has to do with species and nature, and it has to do, so it's related to DNA and putative survival value that is assumed or acknowledged as having survival value. Good. It should be also susceptible to capturing symbol system. And this is how we can tell there was intelligence in the ancient world. So any way to capture it is a proof of intelligence from the ancient pyramids, for example, in Egyptians and so forth. Another important aspect is that it should be supported by evidence from, this is very obvious, right? With a battery of tests for intelligence. But we will see that we're going to take distance from the traditional view of IQ, which focuses on linguistic and mathematical intelligences. We're going to talk about other kinds and how this affects our learning. Good. Are we good? Any questions so far? Good. So it should also be distinguishable from other intelligences through experimental psychological tasks, which makes sense and it's quite obvious, but it's an important criteria. And last but not least, it should demonstrate a core information processing system. This has to do with cognitive processes that are controlled and tested by specialists. Really, it's not so obvious as geniuses that as we mentioned in the beginning. Good. So another question: how many classes or how many kinds of intelligence are there? Here I gave you a few ideas. 5, too many to count. 8, it depends on the categorization you choose. What do you think? Much more than that? Okay. What? So you could go for the last one? The answer will be funny. Everyone is right. It depends on the categorization you choose, but according to Dr. Gardner, there are 8 kinds of intelligence. So if you chose 8 internally, you were also right. But it is true that there are different theoretical frameworks. So one very obvious, and that somehow makes us be here, is the linguistic intelligence. This kind of intelligence is the ability to learn languages, very obviously, or to do things with languages. For example, great writers, we have Murakami here, Shakespeare, poets, all of them have a great linguistic intelligence, and many polyglots here. Another one that is very obvious and known probably, and that is usually tested at schools, is the logical mathematical kind of intelligence. We can think of examples of talented people with a high level of this intelligence, such as maybe Einstein could be an example of someone with a great intelligence in this area. Of course, there are so many others. Then visual spatial. The visual spatial intelligence has to do a lot with imagination. Many people with this intelligence or a high development, they are daydreamers. They are good at drawing. They are good at making maps. One example from history would be Christopher Columbus, or the greatest painters, Van Gogh, for example, and so many. Any questions? Are we good? This intelligence is, of course, kind of obvious, is the ability to develop, understand musical patterns, to create music or to understand music. People with this ability transform sounds somehow and translate them into music. They express themselves through music, or people with this kind of intelligence, they cannot learn without music, for example. This one is less unknown, I think, the naturalist. Have you heard about this intelligence before? People with this kind of intelligence are known for classifying or understanding nature. We can think of Cousteau. I'm not good at French. You know, the one that studied life in the ocean? Jacques Cousteau. He's a great example of a naturalist. And of course, Darwin. He was an excellent naturalist. So you might find your naturalist maybe as a kid. Another kind of intelligence here is the bodily kinesthetic. Have you heard about this kind of intelligence? People are nodding. What is there? What do you know about it? It has to do with the body, of course. So athletes and dancers, as we can see, people who express themselves through their bodies. And here I want to tell a story. I don't know if you have seen this wonderful, beautiful TED Talk by Sir Ken Robinson about education. Do you know Sir Ken Robinson? He tells a story that is so heartwarming, it's beautiful, about a choreographer and dancer, Gillian Lynn. I don't know if you know about her. Most people don't, but she is the genius behind amazing musicals such as Cats or The Phantom of the Opera. It turns out she was born in the early 20th century, and that's funny, Sir Ken Robinson makes the joke, back in the days they didn't have this condition, ADHD, I think it's called in English, that when people are, like, kids are moving all around or they can't sit still, they take the pill and they make them like pay attention because they get numb with the drug. So Gillian wasn't doing well at school. She was 8 years old and she was all over the place. The teachers were concerned, so they called their mother and tell their mother, "We're sorry, we think your daughter has a learning disorder. You should see a doctor." Just like that. So the kid was so worried, the mothers as well. So they go to this doctor. Thankfully, I hope this doctor is still alive. So they go to the doctor, and he listens to the mother's complaints, and he says, "Okay, he approaches the girl and says, well, Lynn, I'm sorry, I'm going to speak to your mother outside. You're going to stay here in this room. We'll be back in a few minutes. So before they leave, this smart person, very cleverly, he turns on the radio that was on the table, on the desk. So they leave. Maybe a few minutes later, they come back and they find this 8-year-old dancing and being herself, expressing herself. And so he says to the mother, just stand there and watch. So Mrs. Lynn, you don't have, your daughter is not sick, she's a dancer. And the prescription is take her to dance school. So, some intelligences are not so highly regarded or not considered. And that's why if society or teachers fail to acknowledge that, we should pay attention also for ourselves. Look at what's going on with me, where am I, who am I, and what are also my talents, and what's my motivation, right? So yeah, it's a beautiful story. So another very important intelligence is the interpersonal. Now we're heading to like the three last ones are maybe the ones that we talk less about. The other ones that were like more academic, more standard. And I believe these two last, if we really work them around, the other intelligences are like skyrocketing, and our lives will be very, very fulfilling. So interpersonal intelligence has to do with how we relate to each other. People with this intelligence, or a high level, I mean, we all have some, but a high level of this intelligence are people who are very empathetic. They perceive people's moods. They have street smarts. They know how to relate with other people, extremely friendly. And usually we find great leaders with this intelligence, such as Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, and Mahatma Gandhi, just to name a few. So this is how we work with others, and we understand each other. This one, wow, this one is a very interesting one, and we barely get to talk about this. The intrapersonal intelligence. What does it mean? How do we understand ourselves? How do we explore ourselves? People with a high level of this intelligence are able to perceive their own limitations, are very intuitive, have a strong willpower, usually end up being leaders because they know themselves. And they can basically overcome almost anything because they know themselves. People like this we can find in someone such as the leader of Tibet, Dalai Lama, thank you. He has interpersonal and intrapersonal go together, because if you are okay with yourself, you will be okay with the rest. Another person that comes to mind, I don't know if you know Tony Robbins. He's a coach. He has worked extensively on himself, and that's what he preaches as well. So as I said, like the last two are kind of key to perceive self-perception and to understand the rest. We are seeing them separately to understand in isolation what they mean, but we all have all of them at a different level of development. Yeah, you have a combination of several. So I said, now we're going to combine this, and we're going to think about the different learning styles. Is anyone familiar with learning styles? Most of you are, right? I've heard some people say, oh, you know, I'm visual. Oh, I'm auditory. I've heard that. Like, oh, I forget everything. If you don't show me the picture, I will never know it. because I'm visual. Some people speak like that. So originally there were 3. They call it VAK, so visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. But I'm considering Fleming's improvement, so to speak, or I find that it's an interesting proposal because it is true that some people learn through reading and writing. So he's converting them into visual, auditory, reading and writing, and kinesthetic. So he added an R in between. And that's how he could get the patent, I think. The intelligences and the learning style, they combine. This is a proposal. This is not definite or like final. You can, of course, see that multiple intelligences can be in different, have different learning styles. Learning styles is considered the way or the activity that is predominant for you when you learn something. So many people are like, oh, I don't know what it said, but I remember the color, I highlighted it. I even remember the stain on the page. They remember all of that. So that would be more of like a visual learner, a visual learning style. So that person who remembers color, context, and everything has more of a visual learning style. Other people are, do you have those, we all have been through education. Do you talk about, you have to study for a test, and some people record it, right? Or they say, I remember what the teacher said, but I don't know what the teacher looked like. So that would be more of an auditory learning style. Then there are people who like to write down, need to copy everything over and over, and that's how they memorize. That would be that learning style. And kinesthetic would be like, what, do they dance to it? Or they practice yoga and they learn. Yeah, maybe. I've done some crazy stuff trying to learn what I had to. Like I would, do you know the school Socrates, they say he used to teach his students through walking. They couldn't be still as they learned. And that was his way of teaching. He was very smart. There is some science behind it nowadays. But the approach of a kinesthetic learner is more of a hands-on approach. So these people usually need learning props or need to touch something. We usually had this as kids when we learned how to count with the fingers or the things. That was a very kinesthetic approach. Good. So, how do I know what my learning style is? What do you say? By analyzing yourself? Experimenting? We can all see ourselves in different aspects, but it is also true that we can also see ourselves more visiting one area more than others. Also, we are conditioned by the way we were taught how to learn. Sometimes we don't think of other ways of learning. We have 5 senses. We have to know ourselves to know which one works for me or what combination works for me. But it's interesting to know what's out there or what some people who have studied this might say. So now we're going to change the tone and we're going to run an experiment. You're going to make friends with many people with SIM cards right now. So we're going to play a game or run an experiment to see how your visual retention works. It's gonna be a lot of fun, I hope. So please, try to memorize the image and the word. Be silent, don't read aloud or hum to yourself or whatever, just be silent. After all the images and words, there will be distraction. Stay focused, because that's where there will be distraction, I promise you. And use the QR code when it's time. So, okay, that's, you will, by the way, you will have the image and the word for only 10 seconds. Then you will have 5 seconds to see the meaning, the translation, and that's how it goes. So, ready, steady, go. Good. Good, that was it. Now you're going to be distracted with the QR code and everything. So here you need to choose the answer. Just choose the one you think. Don't tell the person next to you. Then, is that okay? Can I continue? Next one, you just write down the word or the number. Just write what. I prefer you write the word. It will be easier. I'm changing. Next one, you choose the word that you think means that. Good. Ready? May I change? Good. This one? Good. Next one? Good. So these are the answers. Who was right with number 1? Raise your hands. Fantastic. And number 2. Very nice. Number 3. Oh, almost everyone. 4. Number 4. Oh, very proudly. 5. Okay. So it was 5. How many did you get 5 out of 5? 4 out of 5. Very good. 3 out of 5? Most people. Good. This is a game so this was just a little bit of practice of to see your visual retention. That's why it was key that nobody could speak or read the words aloud. And if you paid attention, the colors were trying to be helpful as well. Like the roots of the words were in red, or if they were infinitives, they would be in red. If they were a noun, they would have a different color. So if you've noticed those details and used them to your advantage, that's kind of a visual learning style. So we're not saying here that everyone is visual, or that's the opposite. We're saying that there is a diversity of ways of learning, and we are also saying that unless we know who we are and how we learn, we will not. We will have the same results, basically. So if we do explore these learning styles and the intelligence that we have, we can excel so much more in our personal experiences and in learning. The idea here, we started our journey today with reflecting upon who we are, how we learn, how we perceive the world, what it means to learn, how we use our intelligences, the criteria for intelligence, the different kinds of intelligences. Daniel Goleman also presents emotional intelligence that is included within the intrapersonal and the interpersonal intelligences. So these are just some ideas and proposals from different studies to know ourselves and our learning styles. And we think that knowing that will enable you to choose the best method, and we are used to having methods for learning to which we have to adjust. So the idea is to find a method that will adjust to your learning style or your preference. Usually the test, someone said the test that they give you or that the magazine has, not only are they biased, but we are biased about ourselves. So AI is the next thing to come that watches the way we behave. So it's real data, not what we think we are or the way we think we learn. And so we think that is very, very important when it comes to learning languages and learning in general. So that was what I wanted to bring you today. And thank you so much for listening to me. If you want to contact me or give me any feedback or whatever, that's my information. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to say this. Arigatou gozaimashita. Thank you so much.